وبعثه الله رحمة للعالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Today, as many of you may have been anticipating, I was planning on showing you some videos of some of the leaders of certain Sufi tariqas here in the United States. But I opted not to today because there's a better place which will contextualize it better coming in the book. And the other point is that we're not here to study tasawwuf. We're here to study how to be better worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the talk that Shaykh al-Islam is bringing about those who attribute themselves to tasawwuf, because not all of them are accepted by the Sufis themselves. These names that you'll see thrown out, they really have no relationship to Islam or any sect in Islam for that matter. And as I mentioned, tasawwuf or Sufism is a very broad term, and there are some that have been attributed, revisionist history has claimed that they are, from the Mutasawwifa, from Sufis, and they're really not. And Sufism during its formative period, which was, in the 6th century of Islam, when it started to actually form in the manner that we know it today, which is when they have the tariqa, right? That they actually have a path that one follows, led by a shaykh, and that was more like 6th century on, which is why you find Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah was born in the 7th century, why this is such a prominent part of his book, because he has to address this in a way that it wasn't addressed by those before him. The same way that you won't see scholars from 400 or 500 years ago addressing the Ahmadiyya, because that just wasn't something that existed during their time. So the scholars who come at that particular time have to address those innovations that happened during their time. As many of you know, here in Philadelphia, we have many, practitioners or even masajid that are Sufi masajid. And because of that, it is important for a person to know how to practice their deen. It doesn't mean that a person is attacking them, bashing them, or otherwise, but the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one, and it has to be clarified. And let those who want to follow, what they believe is the truth, because that's what they're going to be asked about by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is important for us, when we get to that point, to have an idea of, who they are and what their beliefs are and so forth. The Rifa'iyya tariqa, for example, which is a very famous tariqa, a broad tariqa, which has other... The interesting thing about all of these tariqas is that over time, even they themselves begin to break up into smaller, sects. And that's normally what happens with bid'ah at the end of the day, is that a person's innovation will lead them to have an allegiance or disavowal because of that, and then it'll create another splinter group and so forth, all of them coming from that main group. So the Ahbash, or the Habashis, which they prefer now to be called the AICP, which is the Association of Islamic Charitable Projects on 45th and Walnut, they are Rifa'iyya, and all of the Habashis throughout the world. But that's, their leader started off as Tijani, and then he left the Tijani, he went to Mecca, he became Naqshbandi, and he made takfir of the Tijani, and then he went to Lebanon, and that's where he became Rifa'i, and then he traveled to Australia and Europe and America and so forth, and began to set up their group, the Ahbash. So here in Philadelphia, you probably eat at their stores, Sides and whatever the other one is called, right? This is they're owned by the Habashis, who follow different things. Right? In Aqeedah, they're Ash'ari, and Tasawwuf, they're Rifa'i, and Madhab, they're Shafi'i, and to the end of it. So they exist. In Overbrook, we have the Baha'i, Bawa Mahayuddin, really Bawa Muhyiddin, but they say, how do they pronounce it here?
Mahayuddin.
Mahayuddin, Muhyiddin, who was a Bengali, Sufi or Sri Lankan, and he came here and he established his tariqah and the fellowship. So many of those who are in the fellowship don't even consider themselves to be Muslim. But I'm saying not that we don't, they themselves don't consider themselves to be Muslim. But for the ones that are Muslim, then they are following his tariqah. So it's important for us to understand what this tariqah means, what it means to have a tariqah, because it's all related to what we talked about last week, where you have a sharia and the tariqah and then the haqiqah, and then after that is ma'rifah. And again, when the munasabah, when it becomes appropriate to visit that again in this book, we will, inshallah. But we need to work through the material, because there's a strategic way that the book is organized, so that we are constantly getting closer, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, to being true worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the whole point that this was brought up for in the book, like I said, was that Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah wants to define for us that if we want to be true worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a way to do that, and it was defined by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so we have to follow that way. As Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu said, ittabi'u wa la tabtadi'u faqad kufitum. Follow and don't innovate, because you have been sufficed. And that was the Prophet ﷺ came with. Follow that way and don't innovate new paths.